What is port forwarding? You might have heard about port forwarding before and how difficult it is to set up one on your computer. But if you understand the basic concepts behind port forwarding, it is much simpler to set up one. If you have a service running in your home computer or in your gaming console, which is within your home's private network, port forwarding allows that service to be accessible across the public internet. But before we dive deep into the concepts, let us understand why you need port forwarding in the first place. If you are a gamer and if you have to set up gaming server, you will need to forward your ports on your router. And secondly, if you are into professional server hosting, like if you have to host your database server or your FTP server or any other server of that kind, you need to forward ports on your router. And if you're using any IP devices like IP cameras, you will need to port forward on your routers. Let us understand port forwarding with an example. This is a typical home network setup. We have our home router and we have our gaming console, and this is the internet, and this is the gaming user outside our network in the internet. So our router has this IP address of 192.168.1.1, which is a private IP address, and our gaming console has an IP address of 192.168.1.3, which is again a local or private IP address. And imagine my game server is running at the port 100. When an external gamer in the public internet wants to connect to my gaming server, he sends a data packet with the router's public IP address as well as the port. The packet travels through the internet and it reaches the router. But our router doesn't know what to do with that packet because the port 100 is not configured in the port forwarding rule. That is where port forwarding comes into picture. We use a port forwarding table. If we configure the port forwarding entries in the router will know that port for any request that comes to port 100 has to be routed to this client, which is 192.168.1.3. Now that we have the appropriate port forwarding entries in our router, the router then sends that packet to the gaming console. This is how port forwarding works. Let us look at a simplified example. Consider an office setup. We have the office reception and we have multiple departments. We have the sales team, we have the shipping team, and we have the customer support team. And if someone calls the office, they could dial in the extension to reach the concerned department. If they dial in extension 1, it goes to the sales team. If they dial in extension 2, it goes to the shipping team. And extension 3 takes them to the customer support team. Consider a customer. She wants to call the sales team. So she dials in the 10-digit telephone number of the office followed by the extension. Once she makes the call, the office reception automatically forwards it to the concerned department. And say for example, if the customer wants to call the customer support department instead, she uses the same telephone number followed by the extension 3, and when she dials in that number, it goes to the customer support department. So to relate this to port forwarding, consider this 10-digit phone number as our public IP address and the extension is our port number. This is how the port forwarding happens in our home network as well. We have our public IP address and we have the port on which the service is running. When an external data packet arrives at our router, it uses that port number in the packet and then it routes that packet to the appropriate client. So to summarize, port forwarding allows our computer, which is within the private home network, to be accessible across the internet. The very first step in port forwarding is to set up a static IP address. Let us see an example. Here's a typical home network. We have John's laptop, we have John's PlayStation, and we have John's iPhone. All these three devices are connected to our home router. Once these devices connect to the router for the first time, the router uses DHCP, which stands for Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol, and it assigns a unique private IP address to each of these devices. If you notice here, the laptop gets a private IP address of 1.2.192.168.1.2. The PlayStation gets 1.3, and the iPhone gets 192.168.1.4. The router in turn connects to the internet. Once the router connects to the internet, it gets assigned a public IP address. If you notice here, 12.13.14.15 is our public IP address. It is essential for us to understand how DHCP works. For example, if my PlayStation is disconnected from the router and it is turned off for a couple of days, and now I try to start my PlayStation again, when it tries to connect to the router assigns a new IP address to our PlayStation. So in this case, all our port forwarding entries that we have set up in our router will not be usable anymore, because the old IP address is lost by the PlayStation, and the PlayStation now has a new IP address. So this is the reason we have to set up the static IP address on our device before we do any port forwarding setup. Let us see a quick demo on how to set up port forwarding. Open up your favorite browser, type in your router's IP address, and then log into your router. This is the welcome page of my Linksys WRT1200AC router. If you are using a different router, your router's welcome screen and the user interface might be different than this. But if you explore all the options available in your router's management portal, you should be able to relate with the settings and options that I am showing right now. The first step in port forwarding is to set up a static IP address. So in this example, I'm going to forward ports from my router into my laptop. I'm going to use DHCP reservations to set up a static IP for my laptop. So in this portal, my DHCP settings are available in the connectivity tab and then in the local network. If you look at here, we see DHCP reservations. Click on it and then manually add a device. I will just say laptop, and my laptop's IP address I want to reserve is 124, and I'm just copy pasting my laptop's MAC address from here, and then click on save. Okay, now we have enabled static IP address on my laptop. The IP address 192.168.1.124 has been reserved for my laptop, which means the router will not assign that private IP address to any of the other devices in my home network other than my laptop. So now that step 1 is complete, let us go ahead and create some port forwarding rules. I want to open port 100 on my router, and then I want to forward all the requests from the public internet to port 100 to be routed to my laptop. So the port forwarding settings is available in the security menu and then in apps and gaming. And then we have an option for single port forwarding. Now we are going to click this add a new single port forwarding rule. So the application name is game server, and I want to open port 100, and my internal port is also 100, and my IP address of my laptop is 124, and then click on save and then click on OK. Now we have done two things so far. First, I have reserved the IP address for my laptop, and the second thing is I have asked my router to forward all the requests to port 100 to my laptop. This is all we have to do with our routers management portal. You can now log out from your routers management portal. Now let us go ahead and test if the port forwarding is working properly. I'm going to use a software called Simple Port Forwarding to test the installation. Okay, if you notice here, there is a place to test the ports. I'm clicking on do it now, and then I'm going to test port 100, I'm going to add it, and then I'm going to check UDP as well. So I'm going to check these two. Let me begin the test. Okay, now it says our port forwarding is success. So it says port 100 is open on my router as well as my laptop, and any request from the public internet to port 100 is being accepted by my laptop. This is all you need to set up port forwarding. First, you have to set up a static IP address, and then you need to create a port forwarding rule on your router, and that's all you need pretty much to set up port forwarding.